Hi, welcome to Building SaaS with Python and Django. My name is Matt Lehman, and I am the streamer for this stream, and we work on Django apps. And I normally work on side projects that I've got going and try and pass along some of the knowledge that I've learned from doing Django development for many years. Tonight, we're going to start on a new project. This doesn't happen super often, but I've got this idea that I want to experiment with, and it'd be nice to have a second project so that we can kind of bounce between projects and try different things out as I've got different goals and timelines for things that don't always line up with the stream. So tonight we'll be working on that new project, which at this point is nothing more than a Readme that we'll go over. But I hope this will be a fun stream to go through. Before I get started, there's a bunch of ways you can keep up with me. I've got a link above to my website and social handles and all that kind of stuff. If you want to support my work and what I do, I'm on Patreon as well. And I want to thank my current patrons, Rupert, Abdulaziz, Patrick, Mark, and Eric, for your contributions. They're really appreciated. If you would like to become a patron, you can do that by going to patreon.com/mblehman, and you can sign up there. Hey, Quetlim. I really got to get how to pronounce your handle right. You've been here before, and welcome. Kuatlim. Kuahutlim? Well, I'm trying. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing it. So tonight we're going to work on a new project, as I said, and I had this idea pop into my head a few weeks ago for a different way to do a social network, and I want to talk through the merits of that idea. Welcome, Terrible Goss. Good to see you here as well. So we're going to discuss the design of that idea, the kernel that I think would make it interesting, and perhaps you are more in tune to social networks than I am. Hey, welcome, Masterflow. Good to see you as well. Maybe you're more in tune to social networks than I am, and this thing already exists. If so, well, it doesn't really matter to some degree. It's kind of a fun thing that we can do in Django, and I can teach along the way. So as a reminder, you're free to ask me anything about Python, Django, or web development. That's what I'm mostly here for, if I could type. But we're going to do a bunch of design thinking today, because I think it is important to remember, as developers, writing code can be fun, and no denying it. I love writing code, and I don't think I'd be streaming otherwise if I didn't enjoy just sitting down and writing some code. But sometimes you need to step away from that and think about what you're going to do. And see if a plan would even make sense and judge its merits by just thinking deeply on it. So let's talk about this idea. And there's a couple of you here already. If you think my idea is terrible, I would love to hear your thoughts on it as well. But here's the social network space as I see it. And I say this coming as someone who has been on many social networks over the years. I graduated from college back in 2006, and it was right when Facebook, which was the Facebook at the time, was starting. And my school, I was not in the Ivy League, but my school was one of the first schools to get Facebook after it started opening up to other colleges. And so I have been on social networks for an incredibly long time. And of course, MySpace and other accounts, Google Plus and Twitter and all these other things. So I have views on social networks, and frankly, most of those views today, when I think about them, are not positive. I have largely stepped away from my social networks because I think a lot of them are kind of poisonous in the way that they present things, and I'm hoping that there's some way to reframe the benefit of a social network and make something that has more meaning. So that's where I'm coming from as someone who's talking about making social networks a social network and doesn't really like them. So there's got to be some other way, right? There's something we can try. And I wrote this down. There's probably typos all through here. I don't know. I kind of wrote this at 1 o'clock in the morning last night. So hopefully this doesn't just read like a fever dream at this point, but it makes some sense to you. So what's the kernel behind the social network that I think would be fun to try and build. My thesis here is that your average social network today is a popularity contest. People build up their presence. They want a platform, like celebrities get on there, which is fine. Like nothing against these social networks in the way their main mode. But my take on it is that doesn't lead to true networks. You get people trying to just follow and create these artificial networks of people they don't actually know and don't have deep connection to in real life. And I was wondering if there is a way to get beyond all that bull, and produce something that has some incentives to make you form your real life network, the people you really care about. And the way I thought to do that was to limit the number of connections. What if your social network had a ceiling? You can't do more than X amount of connections. And if you try to, you're just stuck. So if you create an account and you have it for years and years, and then you get to the top and there's no more room to grow, and you meet your best friend the next day, or someone who becomes your best friend for the next 20 years of your life or something, you're kind of out of luck. So if there were a bit of pressure on you, but by a social network to not do that, to not be super liberal with how you give out requests and grow your network, then maybe you'd be a bit more selective about who you put in there. Maybe it'll be people that are really in your community, whether that's your town, whether that's school friends that you had, whatever it is, people that you actually keep in touch with and care about. So my idea is to limit the number of people. I actually don't know of a tool like that, but I'm sure they exist, and they might help people that otherwise just I've never had the it's not a disease, but the temptation to just have unlimited tabs. I see some people that are hundreds of tabs, and I just wonder how they deal with that. That's never been my thing. But yeah, that give it a constraint. That's the core of the idea. So I think my thesis is that will encourage people to create a network of people they really care about, knowing that they only have so many opportunities. And then the second half of this that I wanted to expand upon was what if not only were you limited by the number of connections, but if you were also limited by the number of requests that you had, if the sum of those two things could be some cap. And why does that matter? I think it matters. I don't know if what platforms you all are on. I'm on LinkedIn professionally, and I get a fairly steady stream of recruiters saying add me to your network so we can network. And the reality is I am not interested in doing that at all, because those people have never to date in my life been helpful on that front. Maybe they are to some people, but not for me. And even if they were, it's not I'm not connected to them. I don't have any association with them aside from them cold outreaching to me. So if a network existed where even the act of sending the request counted against your total, then I think all of those kind of people who are going to spam you with stuff of add me to your network, suddenly they are massively disincentivized from doing that. Because if they just are willy-nilly with their number of requests and nobody responds, then their network is zero, and they can't use the network anymore. So those are the kind of two core concepts behind my idea. I have no idea if it's actually would play out, but that's the big ideas behind this. And like I say at the bottom here, the vision of this is to create Yeah, they could create multiple accounts ultimately. You're right, but then they'd have to leave those accounts behind, and then they're doing multiple account management. So there's no doubt ways to game even this system. It's not perfect, but I it's not meant to be perfect either. So, but I think this would lend itself towards is like people making real connections and people being judicious about the connections they seek out, knowing that they could be rejected if their request isn't met by isn't welcome, and that prevents them from making another connection, and all of that. So that's my high level vision. I did also craft up some rules, and I guess if you all want to stare at this with me, here is the link. Yeah, that's kind of exactly what I'm hoping for Azureflow is like. These are people you care about. These are people that maybe if you were in a fraternity in college and you actually have like deep ties. Maybe that's not a good example. I don't know, but maybe you have buddies at a church or a synagogue or some other religious institution, or maybe you just have old school friends that you see all the time, or maybe you have a gaming group that like you're really tight with. Whatever it is, that would be awesome to have that kind of connection. Yeah, totally terrible, Gus. I was thinking this would be invite only. In fact, as I was thinking about like features that I don't want in this, I was thinking like I don't want a search feature necessarily. I don't want you like going out and just like looking for, oh yeah, I knew that person from high school. I wonder if they're on here, and let me go add them. And I only had one class with them, but it'd be cool to connect to them. Like I actually don't want that. I want it to be something of more to the effect of you meet somebody in real life, you get to know them through local meetup, whatever. You feel like you're becoming friends with them, and it's at that point that you exchange this kind of deeper link, and that you give them your handle or whatever, or an invite of some kind, and connect with them in a meaningful way. All right, so that's the vision. Here are the rules and the arbitrary numbers that I picked, that I'm hoping to like shape. And again, this was all written like literally last night, less than 24 hours ago. It was like 1 a.m. my time, and so I don't know if this all makes sense, but this is going to be what we're going to go with for now. Okay, so I had to pick a number. In order for this like limitation and constraint system to be meaningful, it has to be a number that is small enough that you can't invite everyone you've ever met, and still be able to, be open like that. But at the same time, you don't want it so small that all it does is cause people anxiety of, like they sign up and create their first one and make their first connection, and they only have 10 more to go. And it's like, I don't want that kind of thing either. So I picked out of the sky 1,000. I don't know that it's right, but I had to start somewhere. It's, as you can see, I even said it's like there's no science behind this. The only thing that I did think of is there's a semi-famous post called "Your 1,000 True Fans." It's a tech culture post, so maybe you've never encountered it before. And it's this is actually kind of tangential. It's about somebody who says like, in order to be successful or be able to like live comfortably, if you could find 1,000 people that are willing to support you no matter what you do, then you could and like sell to them, you could have a decent life. So this is, again, I'm not getting into economics, but I like a number had to be picked, and this is the article that popped into my head, and it's a number that seems a little high, frankly, to me. But some people have much larger social networks in their life than I do. So I wanted to like accommodate different kinds of folks. So that's the ceiling. The next aspect of it is as I mentioned, the actual attempt to connect to somebody would count as part of the total. And I tried to put some details about what I thought that would mean, even include some potential states for what those connection requests would go through in order to tally them in the system. So the nominal state here is like you send a request to your best friend and they accept it right away. In that case, the request isn't counted against you anymore. It kind of like transforms into an actual connection, and that's one of your 1,000. These other two states here are the negative states of you're either actively rejected, like you tried to connect to someone that you didn't know and was a complete stranger, and they're like, no, get out of here, and they reject you. And then this other state is, I think it would also be interesting to make these invites or requests or whatever they end up becoming, whatever that we end up naming them, to have an expiration time. So, the idea behind this is, what is it? It's if the person's not like, maybe the person might connect with you, but they weren't receptive to this thing and they weren't ready to try it, but you just like sent it to them anyway, just because you thought you could. And that way, I think this would be another mechanism to force people to only connect when they really mean to have connection, and there's already kind of an agreement on the other side that they're going to connect in a timely fashion. I don't know what that timer would be. I mean, it could be pretty generous of like a month or something like that. But if you've got an open connection request and someone doesn't accept it, it shouldn't be open forever. It should eventually be a strike against you. Because as I say here, like there's also that person that doesn't want to hurt your feelings and they just kind of leave it to the side and just ignore it. And as a way to be kind by their inaction. And then the final set of what I call these rules that I have down here that would be part of this is that existing connections, there's a permanence to them. So even if someone created an account and deleted it and they're no longer in the system, that still counts as one of your 1,000 connections. If you, as the example I gave here, is like if you're in a relationship and it ends up going badly, and you want to deliberately sever it, you could like burn that connection, and so they could never get your information again. Like I'm trying to think about like safety for people here. I hear a lot about on Twitter some of the abuses that go on there, and so I feel like there needs to be a way to just permanently say like, yeah, you were in my connections, but as of this date or as of this action, your account is, or your connection is permanently no longer connected to me. But I think that as part of that, let me read your question in a second. I'll get back to that. I'll get over there in a second. So as part of this, did I lose my train of thought? Maybe I did. Yeah, I was just trying to look up for ways to like avoid abuse. I think I lost my train of thought. So let me read your questions and see what you wrote and see if we can talk to that. What if the user handle changes after each connection so that users can't just share their handle publicly? That's a good point. I think I wasn't concerned terribly with privacy. So I did say earlier that I don't want to build in a search feature. At the same time, I want people to be able to publicize that, let's say I have this site and I have my handle on there and I put it on my website. Because this system is kind of will penalize you if I don't know you. If you send me a connection request and you're some rando on the internet, which at this point you kind of are terrible gossip, getting to know you a little better now. But if I didn't have any kind of relationship with you that wasn't meaningful enough to actually connect, then I could reject that or ignore it, and it would be a strike against your account if you're trying to, and I'm picking on you, I don't mean to, but someone who is trying to make that connection back. So I think it could be public, and folks who are trying to be spammy and trying to connect to those public names could still be penalized by making connections that they shouldn't be. Yeah, I thought it was a pretty clever way to handle that, to make it be. It was surprising that the more I thought about this, like this aspect of it being the summation of your connections and your requests, the more I was like, oh, that's actually pretty cool that it has this forcing function of, making you think twice about who you try and connect to, and that it's got to be real, or it should be realer, I guess, if that's a word. So these are the ideas that I came up with to start. I'm not sure how best to approach this, frankly. We could do a bit of like modeling of what potentially would go in here. What are the core elements? What are aspects about the system that would matter? I guess let's start with like maybe the kind of proof of concept of what I think would be cool as initial set of features. So let's just call this features, and let's write some notes down. I don't know that they're going to be right, but got to start somewhere, right? So and I am drawing a little bit from other social networks that I've been part of. So if you've been on some of these social networks, you might be like, hey, wait a minute, I recognize that. And you should, because the social network people that have built these things, there's been some pretty good thoughts. The first version of this that I think would add value is to let people have like permanent kind of contact information. And, maybe if you're in the Android ecosystem or iOS ecosystem for your personal phone right now, and you have a Gmail account, let's say, you might already have your contacts stored in Gmail. And I know I do. I have a lot of them. But that is permanently tied to Google. And various people have strong opinions about Google. Some think it's okay, some think it's not. But it is limited to a single platform. And, my thought was, well, what if in that world where you have contacts, let's pick on the Google contacts. What if you're connected to someone and they change their phone number? They get a new phone and have to change their phone number for some reason. Like it doesn't really happen very often anymore, but it does happen. In the world today, that phone number has to be like, that person has to then notify you that, hey, I've got a new phone number. And if you want to still be connected to me, you have to update your contact list to get your new phone number. But in this network model that I'm thinking about is if they update their phone number and you are have visibility to it, then your list of their phone number and your ability to talk to them remains the same, because they're updating it. It's just you're viewing their information because they've permitted that. So that's like kind of the most basic level of functionality that I think would be useful is the people that you care about and share information to ways to get in touch with them, whether that's phone number, address, what other websites they want to share, what other platforms that, like it doesn't have to be just because this is building a social network doesn't mean there aren't other social network for special purposes that people might want to share about. Like maybe they have an Instagram account and they want to share pictures and stories or whatever from over there. So acting as a hub, and I think I even listed it in the top as a Rolodex, which is an old term. I actually don't know how old all of you are, so if you're not as old as me and you've never heard of a Rolodex before, I hope I'm not patronizing here. I apologize if I am. Rolodex is this little guy here. That's a card of like contact information that people most computers would have to contact people, right? So that's kind of what I'm thinking, like an initial bit of feature work could be, is connecting to each other and keeping contact information in sync. So that's kind of the first core feature that I think would be there to make sense. And as I did do a little bit of thinking, this is keeping me up at night, and this is part of why I'm doing this project, is like I got to get this idea out of my head. It could be a terrible idea in the long run, but if I don't try it, then it's just going to be stuck in there. So as I thought about contact information, it did jog my experience with with Google Plus, frankly, and Google Plus had this nice idea of circles, is what they called them. And circles was another name for groups, more or less. And if you really looked at it deeply, it was more like labels. So you could have people in multiple different circles. And I do think that there's value eventually in having some kind of grouping capability. So if these are all your like gaming buddies, and you go play board games with them, you could put them in a group so that you could maybe message them collectively. That can be cool. But in terms of like a privacy policy, I think it makes sense to take the opposite view of what Facebook did and start with data being as private as possible, and then give people the option to expand out. And so clicking with the circle idea and privacy, the thought that came into my head, for good or bad, was considering an inner circle. That concept of this is your tightest network. Maybe this is your spouse or your parents, or like people that are super, super close to you and are super important in your life. And I thought, like, well, what if I took that inner circle concept and made that a like control level? So basically having like a middle circle and an outer circle. That way, the folks that would be in your inner circle would be able to like see all the information about you, emergency contacts, whatever. They have like full visibility to information. So that's kind of that would just be the default behavior. But folks would not start in your inner circle. Folks would, like, if you made a new connection, they would probably start, you would just assume you'd give them the least amount of visibility, and they're kind of like working into your core. So connections default to the outer circle. Hopefully is this concept making sense? Am I talking crazy? So by giving it these kind of three rings, I keep doing this motion because I'm in my head, I'm thinking of different concentric circles, and the inner circle is where I am. I'm like putting me in the middle, and then there's a band of middle, and then there's the outer circle. And if folks were in one of these three rings, you could control visibility. So let's say one of the things that's in this social network is an email field. And then and so let's call this like field example. So we've got this email field, and you could give it control levels so that folks when they're looking at your profile, you could define it so that only, if the inner circle is always going to see everything, the inner circle will always see everything. But maybe you want to make it so that your middle circle can also see your email. But maybe you don't want your outer circle to see your email for whatever reason. Maybe this is more like casual acquaintances. I don't know. I don't know how people would use it, but I think that having just a handful of layers to keep it simple is the goal, yet give you enough control of saying these people are super important. These people have a medium level of importance, so they shouldn't see, my blood type. I would doubt that kind of information would be in there, but you get the idea of something that's a little bit more private that you don't want to share with everyone. And then your outer circle is I'm connected to you well enough to want to, let you see what I'm doing and let you have some insight into my life, but I'm not willing to share my phone number with you because I just don't know you that well. So that was my thought on an access control policy. So to record things here to make sure that this all gets kept for posterity. All information is private by default, in contrast to Facebook. Although maybe Facebook has gotten better. I don't think so, but maybe they have. So that's that. And frankly, dealing with this much information alone is probably enough to get pretty close to started on this project. If the starting point is information and access, a little bit of access control is another way we might call these circles as access control, the concept, or permissions might be another way to frame it. Those are things we can consider. Okay. So that would be the base feature. When you're actually on the network, what can you do? And you got to start somewhere, and I don't want to overthink it and try and deliver on too much. And having contact information, getting phone numbers and addresses and email addresses and all of those other things is a great starting point, because then it does become that Rolodex. Okay. So I think that's what I want to say as the first feature. Okay, but that's the user facing feature. There's a lot of other features that need to be part of the system. And one feature that has to be there is a robust set of logic around those connection requests. As I've said, in the rules that were outlined, the connection requests are going to be a pretty critical element to balancing, how many connections you have and how many possible you can have with these pending connection requests. So there needs to be a really solid invitation flow, I guess. And I was wondering if there is a way to make some of this viral, because there's two primary use cases that I see for an invitation flow, or at least two primary kinds of people that would be part of this invitation. And the first is people, well, let me write down two types of people that you would invite. The first is people that already have accounts. And frankly, if this were ever to even get off the ground and succeed, This would be the not normal case for a very long time, unless the network effect kicks in and people start creating accounts. In this invitation flow, the people that have accounts, the connection request would count against the total. Just leave it at the total, 1,000 above. And would have the same expiration, all of that stuff that we talked about. But that's not the normal case. What's the normal case? The normal case would, for a long time, would be people that don't have an account. Because this means that you are reaching out to them outside of the social network. And so that means you have to have their email and get them in that way, or give them some kind of link. Somehow you'd have to share information that would get them to actually like on board and create an account and connect, which is kind of it's a big thing to ask people to do. There's a lot of determination of like, is this something I actually want to sign up for? So in this system and in this step, I think that this part, I can't imagine counting that against you. If you're like actively trying to invite people to join, why would I, as the author of the social network, penalize you for trying to expand the network? And like, these are probably the people that are important to you. Like if you've signed up for your first account and you also wanted your brother or your sister to be in your network and they're not part of it yet, then it wouldn't really make sense to like have that request be counted against you if they decide not to, because not everybody's going to want to. And that's a reasonable thing to not a reasonable thing to put on people if they are actively. I don't want to penalize the people that are trying to grow the network and make it more useful. That's the core idea there. So people that don't have an account use an invitation flow that doesn't impact the total. That's my thought anyway. If y'all disagree with me and think that that's crazy town, then feel free to chime in. So what else would be important? Yeah, that's good. Like, I think you're right on Key-Ray C. You're coming up on like already thinking about the good edge case, or it's not even an edge case. It's just a real case that might happen sometime later. I suspect that invitation just kind of burns up into the ether. That it doesn't need to be kept as expired, or some other state could be tracked. Like maybe I do keep track of it in case somebody becomes like super spammy, because there could be the person out there that's like, I'm going to create an account and then I'm going to email 10,000 people that I just want them to join. Like there's an abuse vector that could happen there that I think is worth probably monitoring for. Yeah, I don't think that the person who doesn't respond for that 30 days and then signs it 30 years later, I don't think that should be counted against you. I think it should just be a connection at that point that would work in your favor. Because if your sibling finally joins 3 years later, then you wouldn't like not want to be able to connect to your sibling because it's a burned connection. That would suck. So these are a couple of features that will be critical. There needs to be like this virality to it. Yeah, I think it is. There is one caveat to what you said there. So I'm building a social network without any idea of like how to potentially make it sustainable could doom it from the start. It took Facebook years before they figured out some kind of business model, and the model they ended up with, I'm not wild about, to put it mildly. So what, like, I guess, yeah, I'm not going to write down business models here because it's a little too far forward thinking, but I'll just talk through them here. So here's some of the thoughts that I've had. Or I'll put it in the chat because I don't need to record it in the repo, but business models. One model is the obvious of doing ads. So people don't like ads. I don't really like ads, but ads can pay bills. You look at your local newspaper. I'm not sure where you all are from, but here in the States, a lot of local newspapers, and they're kind of struggling. But if you go to the newspaper's website, they're pretty riddled with ads these days to try and keep the lights on. So not optimal, but that is a path. Okay, another option is a membership style site. Or let me say it as pay membership. And the problem with pay membership is you dramatically are limiting the people who are going to join right away. In fact, there was a social network that was attempted a couple of 3, 4, 5 years ago. I don't remember how long ago now. That tried to have like a pay first model that you could only be a part of this social network if you, from the ground floor, paid. And it didn't work because I can't even remember its name and it didn't stick around. But I think there is a variant of this that could be interesting. So let's assume ads by default, and then membership to remove ads. So an ad-free version of this. This is a model that you can see on Pandora, Spotify. This is not, like, I'm not being creative here. I'm just trying to look at business models that exist. In those scenarios, Pandora and Spotify, they have more control over what you're exposed to because it's audio and you sometimes can't skip ahead. So they're in a better spot. And if you're using a web browser, then it's possible to get rid of ads by using an ad blocker, unless you get the annoying pop-ups that say, like, you're using an ad blocker from New York Times or whoever, and they prompt you to turn that off. In which case, do whatever you do to block them. I don't know. So those are, I guess that's a third model. So third model is pay to remove ads. Okay. And I'm getting back to your point, I promise, KRC. So yeah, I'm not even thinking about it as per month. I was more thinking of there are gonna be a subset of people that they are really popular, or maybe they are in real estate and they really, really, really value their network. So one possibility that I had thought about was pay for more connections. If the connections. So if that was an option, and again, this is like way down the road possibility thinking here, but I'm just trying to think of options. Give this site optionality before it's doomed itself to not even consider a business model. What would that look like? I would still want to discourage gross abuse of getting a number of connections, because you can imagine, if I gave it a flat rate of like, $100 for 1,000 more connections, if I did that, then what happens? Then you get the celebrity who, and that's not per month, that's like a flat fee. Then you get celebrities who will just say, all right, cool, I can basically buy influence relatively cheaply for these people that make millions of dollars, and I pay you $1,000 and suddenly I have the opportunity for 10,000 more connections. And this is not, I don't envision this kind of network being one where you seek a platform. It's fine for celebrities and folks like them, politicians, whoever, to go use a different network to get their megaphone. That's what they want to do. I wouldn't want this social network to be that. I want, again, getting back to like, what is the heart and goal of the social network would be to like be real meaningful connections as much as possible. And for those that just have a lot of connections, they can buy into that a little bit. So where I was thinking of is making this exponential. So, your first 1,000 extra connections would be $100. Your next one would be, your next 1,000 is $200. Then after that, go up exponentially, 400, 800. And, the idea being to frankly disincentivize somebody buying more connections unless they are really financially invested in that. And I don't think most people would be. I think it would kind of top out at some point. So that's one thought I had about a potential way to pay that, for that truly desperate person, if somebody wants to pay me $32,000 to get another 1,000, or whatever the number would be, to get another 1,000 connections, I wouldn't say no. I think it'd be foolish, but I wouldn't say no. Okay, yeah, because $32,000 that could cover the entire infrastructure cost for a year, perhaps. I'm fantasizing now about where something like this could go, but the whole point of that little business model discussion was to think about, how could this be paid for? All right, so I think this is like, and I don't know if anybody disagrees, maybe there's more features that you think are necessary before making this more viable. But to me, this feels like a minimum viable product. A minimum viable product is you can create your account, you can add your basic contact information, there's access controls, private by default, that allows you, oh, thanks, see you around, that allows you to give visibility to certain tiers, and then a really solid, well thought through invitation flow that starts to expand your network and has a bit of virality to it by having an invitation flow that can get people outside of your network via email or some kind of connect URL, something like that. I think that that's enough of a start. What does this look like? So, I see, looks like on the stream says there's probably 5 or 6 of you on there. It's something that I'd like to like get going and then get out there. And, I talk about patrons that I have who are helping out. And, some of them, like Rupert is a superhero level patron who's very graciously giving me $15 a month through Patreon, which is amazing. And I want to make the most of that. So I have always said that like the purpose of the money that I get from patrons is to try and turn it around as best I can and improve this stream. So if that means building out a real site and buying a domain and setting up the email service to actually get the invitation flow working and allowing you as the viewer to participate and be part of that, and start working through, like what are the features, how's this going to work, is, just explore with me this crazy idea that I have. that's something that I think would be fun. So that's my plan. We're going to try to get this minimum viable product up. We'll make it pretty enough to be usable, and then we'll go from there. And maybe that means, like, there's so much potential opportunity here of building a Django website, building perhaps mobile apps someday. That would be quite an adventure for me. I'm very, very familiar with doing web development, not so much on Android, iOS, whatever. So even the prospect of making a native app for this is a little daunting. But maybe that wouldn't even be necessary for a very long time. But I think there's so much potential to learn from here that it just seems like a fun project. I hope you agree. If you don't, that's fine. You can follow along and watch me fumble through some of these things as I learn. So that's where we're going to start. I'm going to commit. We added some features, and in fact, I'll change the name from features to MVP features. And MVP, if you don't know, is minimum viable product, which is a thing that's used in the startup space. But that's why I'm writing that. And we'll get that in there and commit it. Add MVP features to Readme. So we have our thesis that we're working from. We want a social network that's going to foster deep connection. We want to avoid spam by leveraging the fact that requests will count against you if you are being bad with them. And I think it's going to create something pretty cool. So now here's where people that don't have a ton of experience might be like, shoot, now what? You've got your idea, and I haven't done any modeling yet, to keep that in mind. Like, I'm not one that thinks that you need to have out all of your models and everything in advance. I don't think that that's necessary. I think that as you get to the feature, you can think deeply on that. So next steps from here are to start our project and get the tools that we need. I don't know. I've done another stream, so we might not get through all of this today. And if you want to go find me do this more fully, you can go to Building SaaS, and I think it was where was it? Stream number 40 something. It's called New Project Who Dis, I believe. It must be, man, I guess I've been doing this for a while. Okay. So you can see right around here, I'm learning from an old failed project, which I learned a ton from. You can go read about that. And then I started a brand new project here. And that project is actually the homeschool project that I normally work on week to week. So going forward, I think I'm going to be mixing it up. I'll be doing some on this social network and some on the Homeschool app as my spouse has needs, because that also has some potentially interesting learnings. In fact, I think what's going to be fascinating about it is there'll be two very different kinds of products in many ways. The Homeschool app that I hope to roll out to a community of homeschoolers is extremely niche. It's focused on the homeschool community and their ability to schedule. Also, it will be designed as a pay service. So we were talking about business models earlier, because of its function as a tool, that what I want to do is go straight from the get-go as a pay membership. You have to pay to use it, to access the tool, get the scheduling benefit. And I can talk more on pricing on that stuff later. So that's what that project will be. And because of that, and because of the space it will be in, it just has a very different set of constraints that this project will not have. So I think that'll add quite a bit of interesting variety to the kinds of problems that we have to tackle. So the social network would be much more open. There'd be more traffic potentially, and a different set of problems that come with it, assuming that it gets some traction. I'm getting a little off on a tangent though, but this set of show notes has all the steps for building a new project. In fact, I might even just reuse some of them here, because I don't have to remember all this stuff. Yeah, let's do that. We're going to work from my own show notes because I think it's going to be a bunch of the same stuff, because I think the tool set that I have is pretty workable, and where it diverges and gets more robust from stuff that I've learned along the way, we can add that. So how do we start? The starting point. Starting point is to create ourselves a virtual environment. Virtual environment is going to hold all of our libraries that we download from PyPI, the Python package index. We start by running that command, and I have so this repository, I guess I should start, let me start with there. I already created a repository so I could have a place to do this README, and the repository that I created I created on GitHub, and it uses a git ignore that is tailored to Python. So even though I added a venv directory here, the git ignore is ignoring venv. You can see it there. It's so that directory is ignored so that it will not be stored into the source code by accident. So we have a virtual environment, and the very first thing that I'm going to need is a tool to keep track of what packages I have. And I'm going to do that by installing a tool called Pip Tools. Bring up Pip Tools and bring up PyPI, get the right version. We'll save Pip Tools 531. And I like to pin these things down so that it's consistent to build it. So we're going to create a new file, and I'm going to call it requirements dev. This is not like the way everybody does it. This is the way that I build my projects. So I like to give my development tools a separate file to live in. Pip Tools is one of those development tools. We want Pip Tools, and we want to pin it to 5.3.1, I think it said. Yep. And we're going to write that file. And now over here, we can do pip. Nope. First, we need to activate the virtual environment. So I'm going to do that. So now virtual environments, if you haven't worked with them before, are just they're directories of stuff that have the code you want in them, and you activate them, which modifies your shell to like look in those directories for the code. And now when we run a pip command, in fact, we can check which it is. It's using the pip command that is in the virtual environment. So everything will get scoped into that directory. So we're not polluting your computer with all the extra stuff. I want to install from the requirements file Pip Tools. Okay, we've got Pip Tools installed, and now it's time to use it. So the first thing about Pip Tools is we want to build our requirements. So this is going to be a Django project. I mean, I'm here to teach you Django. I'm here to use Django because I like it, and I'm not going to deviate from that. So we're going to get Django, and I'm going to search for it to find the right version. It should be 3.1. 3.1.2 is the version of Django we want. And so the way to do that is to create a new file, and this file is going to be called requirements.in, not .txt. And that's because we're using Pip Tools, and Pip Tools is using a convention. Let me write this down first. Of considering this like an include file, which I think harkens back to auto tools when you're building like C++ projects. Don't worry too much about the history. It doesn't really matter. But by having this file here, we're declaring our logical dependencies. We care about having Django. Whatever Django has, we don't care. Like Django has its own dependencies, and we just want Django to have them. It doesn't. We don't really care how it got them or what it uses. So we're going to use this pip compile command here that comes from pip tools. And Z-shell does some weird things for me, so I need to deactivate and reactivate my thing first. So I'm going to paste in this pip compile command. And what this command says is it's going to read my requirements.in file and find out Django plus all of its dependencies and write those out to a requirements.txt file. And I think it'll also put it out in the terminal here. So this is the file that is also stored in a new file, requirements.txt, which we can view and see what's in there. The file is generated. It says, our version of Django is this, and you can see with these comments at the end that Django depended on ASCII-ref, PyTZ, and SQL parse. So now we're ready to install our packages. So we'll do pip install r, and then give it the newly generated requirements.txt file. And that's going to install Django. All right, cool. So what do we have? We've got our requirements. Let's stop here and save those. We're going to commit those to the repository. Add Django to the requirements. I'm not going to mention pip tools because it doesn't really matter too much. We're now ready to create a Django project. And I often say this, but I'll say it again because it's worth repeating for those that may not have Django experience. A Django project is the web application. A Django project is like the top level thing that the web application uses, and Django applications are the components that feed into the project. So your project has all your settings, configuration, all of your important starting stuff. So I have started calling my project directory that gets created by this command project. I think it's just the clearest, stupidest name that I could possibly devise. And so what did that do? You can see by running the start project command, we got a manage.py file, which is an executable that we can use to run new Django commands. And we got a project directory. And the project directory is the very basics of a Django project. In fact, I also, whenever I run these kind of scaffolding tool commands, unless there's really obvious changes that I can make, just like deleting whole files or something, I commit these files as is without modifying them so that I know from my own point of view, that I had a solid point where I didn't mess with anything. So if I ever needed to go back to be like, what did Django produce for me? I have a commit in my history that has all of that stuff. And you can see it's quite full. It's generated a settings file and all this other stuff. So let's add that. And we'll call it the add Django project skeleton. Okay. Now, I want to run that for a moment, just to make sure that Django is working correctly. So it's telling me we have unapplied migrations. That's fine. We're not caring about anything yet. So we're going to open this URL, and here we are. So our Django app is working. That's cool. what can we do next? We need to, and then here I show that I've got that command to do the same verification. So I'm going to continue to follow along. I'm going to deploy this project to Heroku, just like I do with the homeschool project, because it's a good place to go. So here we are, and I'm going to say Heroku Local, just like I have in those show notes from that previous stream. And you can see it's complaining about, like, it can't figure out what this thing is. So there's no proc file, no package JSON. So in fact, the next thing I want to do is copy from the Homeschool app, because I have it. So let's go up a directory and copy the proc file here. So now we have a proc file as well. And that proc file is a concept that is part of Heroku that tells Heroku what processes are you going to run. The other thing you'll note, like now if I run Heroku Local, it's still going to fail. Why is it going to fail? Because I don't have gUnicorn. I haven't installed that yet. So we need to install gUnicorn, as it mentions here. So we're going to return to the requirements in file, and let's look up on PyPI the gUnicorn version, because I don't know what the latest is. So we want gUnicorn 20.0.4, and I make this alphabetical because that's what I like to do. So we have gUnicorn. We will then, the next step is to do the Pip Compile command to generate a new requirements file, because gUnicorn might have dependencies of its own. I don't know. Looks like it doesn't. Cool. And we'll go ahead and do the pip install to get gUnicorn. So now we have gUnicorn installed. Now if we run Heroku Local, and Heroku Local I think is something I installed through Brew. It's basically Heroku calls it the tool belt or the CLI. I don't remember exactly what they call it these days, but it's a set of Heroku commands that allow you to interact with Heroku. And we've got this here. I don't know if this is going to work. Let's check it out. Nope. All right. So it's saying we don't have 0.0.0.0 to allowed hosts. So that's probably also in my notes over here. Okay, instead of, so Django Heroku is a package that I use. I'm going to be frank, like, I don't know this is strictly necessary for new projects that want to use Django. I think if you actually go to Django Heroku and look at it, I think it's in archive mode. So no one is maintaining this. This used to be maintained by by the Heroku team, but specifically by, I think it was by Kenneth Reitz, the creator of the requests package, and he no longer works at Heroku. And as you can see, it's getting pretty old. So, but what does it do? It's mostly about this one big function that configures a bunch of stuff. And the reason that I still use it today is that, as far as I know, like, this stuff on Heroku hasn't really changed that much. But and it's a kind of a big but. There's some not, in my opinion, not so great stuff in here anymore. For example, I want to say that the logging configuration in there is like just broken, if I remember correctly. So I'm jumping over. We're looking at the Homeschool app for a minute. I'm going to steal heavily from this because this is kind of the cool part about it. If you build the projects and you figure this out once, you can start to copy bits around as you need to. Frankly, there's probably some argument to make this a cookie cutter template or something, but each project ends up being unique enough that I don't create enough projects from scratch that I don't think it's worth it for me to do that. But if we go to the settings of this app and come down to the bottom, you can see that I've started to turn some stuff off here. So I'm going to use Django Heroku, but I'm going to follow the logic that I've laid out here because there were reasons that I turned all these things off. As I said, the logging was broken. The secret key, it generates one for you if you don't have one, which is kind of weird, in my opinion. I mean, maybe it works to get started quickly. There was also some weirdness with the test runner for something else. I don't really remember. But I'm going to take this. So we're going to come back over to the project here, and we're going to say Django Heroku, and I'm sure that package has not changed. So let's see what it is on this project over here. Sorry, I'm jumping around quite a bit, y'all. I hope that I won't have to do that too much more. So Django Heroku 031. And 0.3.1, and looks like it's a dash instead of a underscore. Although I think PyPA will accept that either way. So let's do the Pip Compile dance again. This is the one downside of Pip Compile, is that it adds an extra step every time you want to add a new requirement. But thankfully, there are few enough times that you're going to add new packages that I think it's worth the trade-off. It's worth the trade-off of separating the logical stuff that you really care about versus all of their dependencies, what's considered the transitive closure, which is the big fancy computer sciencey word to say all the dependencies. Because look at all this other junk that got pulled in. It's not junk, it's necessary. Look at the extra stuff that got pulled in by Django Heroku. This database URL, PsychoPG2 for Postgres support, white noise. These are things that are in there. There are probably also things that are, that's maybe a little unnerving. Let me check on the version of white noise. I hope that package is not pinning to a really old white noise. It might be. Nope. Okay. It's still in the latest. Cool. So we're now going to pip install these. And it's going to get going. It is preparing PsychoPG2 for my local environment here on a Mac. And we can come over to the settings file. And I'm going to import Django Heroku here. Okay. And then over on this Homeschool application, I'm going to steal this line so that we can paste that at the bottom. Okay. So I have a feeling this still might fail because when I did the show notes from a long time ago, I didn't do any of these false settings. So some of us might complain we might still be missing settings from the other project. Namely, I think, was there a secret key already set here? Yeah, there's a terrible secret key right here. Well, it's not terrible, it's fine, but it's terrible that it's going to be, that it's already committed, which means it's already no good. Although I guess I technically haven't pushed yet, but the second that I push this code up to GitHub, the secret key is no good. And the fact that you can all see it right now, so somebody could pause this and compromise the entire site by that. So we're not going to worry about that. I'm going to eventually swap out the secret key and make it an actual secret so that neither you nor anyone else can discover that and keep the site safe. Why is that important? The secret key is used for a lot of different things. And part of what it's used for is the hashing algorithms. So if someone can figure out the secret key and know what hashing I'm using, which, oh, by the way, the code will be up online, so they'd be able to figure that out too, then they could figure out passwords. They could crack passwords and stuff, or pass in stuff. It'd be bad news, so we don't do it. The thing that we will do is put secrets in a different tool and store them in environment variables, which is Heroku's way. But I don't know that I'm going to get to that today. So let's try Heroku Local now and see if it passes. Or see if it runs, I should say. Cool. So it's running. It's running on port 5000 on broadcast IP address rather than localhost. And we have a successful app. All right, let's see if I figured out other things that I want to do. Okay. We can, yeah, let's do this too. Let's deploy it all the way to prod, to production. So got this here. Actually, first let's commit this stuff. A lot of these formatting changes was because I used black in my text editor, and so what you're seeing here is some reformatting. Most of what you're seeing is it's changing single quotes to double quotes because that's what Black likes to do. And then we've got the Heroku settings stuff at the bottom here. And we've got the new packages and the new requirements. So let's add this as a commit and say prepare for Heroku deployment. Okay. Final thing to do, according to my own show notes, we'll see how truthful it is. I think it's accurate, is to do Heroku create. And this will create, ooh, I like that name, fun, Mysterious Waters. Sounds like a terrible Halloween movie. Or a fantasy movie, I don't know what. So that's our new project. And if I go there right now with Heroku open, and in fact, if you all want to go there too, here you go. So that's where this new Django app is going to live for now. We can, as soon as it becomes like even close to minimally viable enough, and we may, let me finish the thought. When it comes close to minimally viable enough, I can buy a domain name and get Heroku pointing to that. That's where costs start coming into play, right? You got to actually buy the domain, and I think Heroku won't let you connect to a custom domain until you start paying them some small amount. So we can get on the hobby tier, which is like $7 a month for a dyno, and have a site going. And as I was about to say it, but I kind of cut myself off. I think this invitation flow is going to require working email, and doing email setup in a way that is trustworthy requires having domain names and doing certain like DNS configuration, and that is all stuff that will have to be in place to do email well. I haven't done email too much. I did it with my not the Homeschool app, but the app before that. I used Mailgun. I don't know if I will again. There's some tools we can use. We'll get to that when we get to that, I guess. So we now have a remote added to this Git repository. And you can see the remote is called Heroku. And so we can do git push Heroku master. Oh, maybe Heroku changed their name too. Well, that'd be cool. Git remote v. What do they call it now? I'm drawing a blank on like the way to figure out what branches that the remote knows about. Okay. Help me, internet. Get remote branches. How do you list them? Is it just get branch minus R? That's for the origin. Get branch. How do we get different remote? Remote tracking. Get branch minus R minus A. Well, that's just the main and the origin. All right, let's go back to the internet for a minute. Get remote show. Show Heroku. Head branch unknown. What the heck? All right, how about we just try, let's assume it's going to be main. Maybe they did the same rename that GitHub did, or maybe it's tied to my own repo name. That actually makes more sense. Because, all right, so here's why I'm struggling. With all of the current events in US politics and all of the protests and riots and whatever, GitHub has changed the name from master to main to be more respectful of people. Cool. And so this was announced a couple of weeks ago as of the time of this recording, of this stream. So all new repositories default to main as their main branch name versus the old name of master. So when I tried to do a push to the remote exists and has Heroku, but I think I need to specify my local branch that I want to push to that remote. So the remote is currently empty and dumb. So I think I probably need to do git push Heroku main. Okay. Cool. And it's doing deploy right now, which is neat. It's doing a deploy. I'm gonna have to probably off the stream, I'm probably gonna have to tear this down because you all have seen the secret key, and it's gonna run the management command, and presumably someone could take the secret key and own the site right now already and hack in to the Postgres data. This is why you got to keep your secrets protected. So I will probably have to tear this thing down. I don't know if I can keep the name though. I really like the Mysterious Waters. That's a fun name. We'll get what we get, I guess. And so it's running migrations because part of what I copied from that proc file. So it's got the web command, and this web command and the proc file, each line. So if you've never encountered a proc file before, the way to read this is the thing before the colon is the name of the process that you want to run, and the thing after the colon is the actual command. So a web dyno, which is the unit of computation on Heroku's platform, will run the gunicorn web server with the project. And remember, I named the project directory project, so that's why it's project.wsgi. And then it's going to log all of the log file output to standard out. That's what this dash means. But I also have this release command, and this is a special command that Heroku has. And the release command says, before you make a deployment live, run this command first. So what we saw on this deployment process is it installed all the stuff, installed all of our packages that we cared about, and it built a, I think they call it a slug, although I don't see the name slug anywhere. But they built the bundle of all the code, right? And that's the thing that Heroku is going to move around to their different machines. But here's where you can see this important comment. So it says, because I declared a release command, the new release, which is that thing they just built, is not going to be available until the release command is done. And that's a way to ensure that any migrations that you have for your database will actually run in advance of the project being live. Okay, so that was a bunch of information, but that you may or may not have cared about. Let's now open this. So now we're at Mysterious Waters, and we have a Django app. Good for us. And what should we do now? I'm probably getting close to wrapping up. I've been talking pretty solidly for an hour and a half. But let's talk about the next steps. And what I may do offline, maybe not. Some of this has like security implications, so it would behoove me to do some of this offline when otherwise I'm playing this game. I have a secret thing, like, so I can turn that off and hopefully you can still see me and hear me. But I don't like messing with that too much. So we need to add in the ability to configure the settings, and actually going back to the stream notes, you can see that's exactly what I did. The last time I built a project, this is the very first step I did, was to build in a way to build settings. In fact, this is probably indication that I may not do this again, because if y'all want to go learn how I did it, it's all right here, pretty well documented, in fact. And I set up both the debug toolbar, which I use as a tool, and the Django environment tool that can manage settings. So we'll do that for the secret key, and then we'll be able to move on. We'll have a place where settings can go, but then it will start getting down to like the actual features that we care about for the project. And I think the first thing I'm going to want to do is have, like, again, getting back to like the minimum viable product that we talked about, which is where the Readme, right? We need this account information stuff. So I think the starting point is to set up where your main user page is going to be, or a profile page, if you will. So I think that's a good place to start, which means that we're going to need to have the user model in place, and we're going to use Django's built-in user model. I don't know that we'll need to extend it or not, but we'll probably end up using a custom user model if we want to add existing extra attributes that will be commonly used. It's nice, in my opinion, to have that option. Another reason why I'm going to have to destroy the database, because I've already broken that user model, if you know how custom user models work. So we'll work on that. We'll put in a user model. We'll make a stupidly bad like user page to look at an existing user by their username, and that will be the starting point. I'm not going to do any design work initially. We're going to display something very, very raw looking, and I think after that we can start to build in ways to log in, permission controls, and then we can plan out some of the invitation flow. But before we can actually get to the implementation of some of the implementation flow, we'll need the ability to send out email. So that'll require some email configuration. In other words, there's a ton of stuff that I think we have to do just to even get a minimum viable product working. Aditya, your question. Are you talking about using it for a Django project? If so, I would say no, it is not advisable to try and use SQL Alchemy. In fact, I don't know that you can use SQL Alchemy with Django without like really breaking your back in terms of what you would have to do, because so much of Django is very hooked into the Django ORM to the point where like some people kind of jokingly say that Django is an ORM with a very thin web layer wrapped on top. Like that's how integral the Django ORM is to the rest of the framework. So I don't think there's any adapters. You could look. I mean, I don't want to dissuade you from, if SQL Alchemy is already the tool, there might be people that have attempted to say like, hey, Django would be awesome if we could use SQL Alchemy on it. I don't know of a tool off the top of my head that does that, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So I would suggest trying that. Okay, y'all. So the next time we'll get into some of these other features that I've talked about here, and I'll clean up the Heroku app a little bit on the other side. Hopefully, you're able to catch in early on. Oh, you're welcome, Aditya. And see what I have in mind for this project. I hope it'll be something fun and different that we can work on and add some variety of the stream. So it's going to be kind of a roll of the dice of what do you see. I won't be streaming for a couple of weeks because I'm heading out on vacation next week and I won't be around that evening. But I'll be back again in a couple of weeks, I hope. Did I say that right? Yeah. Won't be here next week. 2 weeks from now, I should be around and streaming so we can get back to this project potentially. Thank you for tuning in. This will be pushed up to YouTube. So if you want to go back and review something, you're welcome to do that. I'm also going to take all of this stuff and as a reminder, thanks. I do hope to enjoy my vacation. As a reminder, this new project is at mblayman on GitHub. It's mblayman/social. Oh, you're welcome. I'm glad you enjoyed this. And so this is where we'll be following along. So if you want, since this is the ground floor, this is a good time to try and clone this and see if you can run it yourself. I'm not sure I would recommend running Heroku, but you can play around with this. I guess is the point of seeing what a project will be like. I promise I will push up the code after the stream. Right now it has just the files that we started with, but it'll have the rest of the code very shortly. So thanks again for tuning in, and I'll see you next time. Take care.